like to welcome you to Darien Library as we continue our Fall Meet the Author series. I'd also just like to briefly mention that programs at Darien Library are made possible by our annual Friends of the Library campaign. So thank you so much for your continued support to make events like this possible. There's also just a few things that are kind of housekeeping matters that I wanted to let you know about before we start. The first is if you could please silence your cell phones if you have them with you. It can just be sort of distracting sometimes when they go off. I know I've been guilty of it, and I also want to save you the embarrassment, because it's really embarrassing when it goes off. I also would like to just explain afterward, Barrett Bookstore is going to be out where you saw them on your way in. They're going to be selling copies of the book. It makes a really excellent gift for the holidays. And then if you continue around the corner, we're going to have some refreshments set up. And also, of course, Patricia Wells will be signing her books by the Children's Library. So I hope that you will join us for that part of the evening. Speaking of Barrett Bookstore, I would like to thank them. They were the ones that arranged for our author's visit this evening, so we're very grateful to them and to Rosanna. And I also would like to thank Wave Hill Breads. When you come out tonight, you'll see that they have a whole setup on our Main Street area. Margaret from Wave Hill Breads emailed me earlier today and asked if she could bring some free samples, and I was like, I would never say no to bread. So yes, you are very welcome. If any of you guys would ever like to bring me free bread, you're welcome to. Okay, tonight's guest really needs no introduction, but I'm going to introduce her anyway. She is a journalist, author, and teacher who runs the popular cooking school At Home with Patricia Wells in Paris and Provence. She's won 4 James Beard Awards, and the French government has honored her as a Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres. I told her before that I was just going to say the French words with confidence and speed, and then hopefully no one would notice my pronunciation. Recognizing her contribution to French culture. A former New York Times reporter, she is the only foreigner and the only woman to serve as restaurant critic for a major French publication, L'Express. She served as the global restaurant critic for the International Herald Tribune for more than 25 years. She lives in Paris and Provence with her husband Walter, and she's here tonight to talk about her most recent book, The French Kitchen Cookbook. Please join me in welcoming to Darien Library, Miss Patricia Wells.
Thank you, Erin. You caught the trick right away. I used to think that if you spoke really fast, that, all your mistakes would kind of be erased in French. It doesn't work. Wow, what a beautiful group, and it's so great to be in this beautiful new space, because I've been to the library many times before, but never in this gorgeous space. Gosh, your faces all shine. You all look so happy and perky. So this is my newest book, The French Kitchen Cookbook, and it's basically based on and started in 1995. So tonight I'm going to give you a starter lesson of kind of the things that we talk about the first day of every class. And probably a lot of these lessons don't apply to you because you already do these things, but a lot of them apply to your neighbor. So you might want to go, when you go home, you can tell your neighbor the things that they've kind of maybe not been doing quite right, okay? So often people ask me, how do I learn to cook? Can you hear me okay? Okay. And I say, well, you learn to cook the way you learn to play the piano or play tennis or golf or work on your lathe machine, which my husband is doing right now in France. What you need to do is practice, 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 practice. But more practically, what I suggest people do is sit down and make a list of the 10 recipes they would most like to perfect. But they can't all be desserts. You have to shake it up a little bit. You have to have a few salads, a little bit of poultry, and you can have 1 or 2 desserts out of those 10. I'll allow that. So you start with number 1. Let's say it's tarte tatin. And so you make tarte tatin over and over and over again until you feel you've got it right. And then you go on to number 2, and you perfect that. And by the time you're to number 10, you've got a repertoire. And people say, I can't wait to go to Suzanne's for dinner tonight because she's going to make us her famous tarte tatin. And it's not really more complicated than that. I mean, that's a good way to start. But the one thing I always tell people when they're in the kitchen, the first thing to do is, guess what? Read the recipe. Make sure you have all the ingredients in your kitchen. And part of reading the recipe is putting together your mise en place, which means everything in its place, which means getting out a tray, weighing and measuring every ingredient in the recipe, because I know it's never happened to you, but probably your neighbor, he or she are in the middle of making a souffle and they need 6 eggs, and guess what? They only have 3. So they take off their apron, get in the car, go to the store, blah, blah, blah. So if you've got your mise en place, you have all your ingredients. And there are a couple of other reasons for the mise en place. One is that you can start your shopping list. You just use the last of your vanilla extract. Okay, start your shopping list. You have no more polenta, shopping list. The other is that when you put something in the oven and you turn around and there's still ingredients left on the tray, guess what? You might have forgotten something. Actually, I have 1 or 2 recipes. I can't remember what they are, but they actually were improved by forgetting something. So, it's just a, kind of a suggestion. The other thing I've noticed often, and this is consistent with cooks, and I'm not sure why, and maybe it's just we're always trying to be economic, but this just doesn't seem economic to me, is that people tend to use a knife or a pan that's too small for the task. I mean, they take a little paring knife and they're going to cut open a pumpkin. No, you need a big knife for that. Read the recipe and look at how much volume this might, you're making something that you need to simmer. Well, if you need to simmer it, you need a big pan, unless you like things boiling over on your stove. So always think, okay, is this the right pan for the task? Is this the right knife for the task? And you don't need to have, a million pans and a million knives. I always tell people, really, you only need 3 knives, 3 pans. But what fun is that? It's like only having 1 dress in your closet. Also, the other thing I preach over and over again, students come to me very proudly and they say, what do you think? And I'll say, did you taste it? Well, no. Well, how can it be good if you haven't tasted it? And the one thing I learned from working with chefs in kitchens year after year is one of the rules is your food should taste seasoned, not salted. So only way to make food taste seasoned is to season at the beginning, the middle, and maybe at the end. But you're tasting. And I find in my own experience, especially soups and anything like a mayonnaise or an aioli, those require tasting and tasting and tasting, because sometimes just a little few grains of salt can make the difference between something tasting good and something tasting terrific. And that doesn't mean you have to use a lot of salt. It means you have to season and taste and think about it a little bit. The other thing, which isn't always the easiest for all of us if we don't have a fairly large kitchen, but I really feel you should think about cold plates and bowls for cold food, hot plates and bowls for hot food. If you have a little bit of freezer space, I suggest, I do a lot of sorbets and cold soups. So I just have a shelf that's devoted to keeping all my little ice cream sorbet bowls in the freezer, and also cold soup bowls, because it's something wonderful about putting a nice chilled cucumber yogurt soup into a nice chilled bowl on a hot summer's day. And the same thing about heating things. And you don't need to have a warming oven, although if you're doing a kitchen, I think that's one of the number one ingredients or pieces of equipment you should have. In fact, in my tiny kitchen in Paris, it's where I actually store all of my plates. And so so what if I have to heat them all up at one time? It doesn't matter. But there's nothing better than making a nice beef daube and putting it on a nice hot plate on a nice cold day. The other thing that I think is really important, and I think the times I've been to your neighbor's house, they cooked really nice dishes, but nothing kind of went together. It wasn't sort of like they planned how things should taste together. They didn't plan how they should look on the plate. And menu planning is really important. And again, along with maybe the 10 things you're going to make, maybe you should work out maybe 4 or 5 seasonal menus of things that work really well for you. And if you simplify that way, when you go to if you make the same menu over and over again, not that you're going to get bored with it, but if you have that in your routine, it's very easy to put together your shopping list. Okay, I'm making this for 6 people tonight, so I know how much zucchini I need, I know how many onions I need, and so on and so forth. And so just get into that routine, and I think that you'll cook more with confidence that way too. And this is the other thing to tell your neighbor. When people get flustered in the kitchen, it's usually because their kitchen's a pig pen. So mise en place helps you also keep everything neat. You've already measured everything, so you can put your baking soda and baking powder back you don't have all these things cluttering up the kitchen. And because the kitchen is nice and clean, you're confident and you're not flustered and everything goes nicely. When in each of my classes on the last day, we always vote for the best taste of the week and the takeaway, meaning how are you going to change cooking when you go home? And it's very interesting to see. It helps me with my own menu planning about certain recipes that come over and over again as best tastes of the week. But often, we always do a ceviche on Tuesday. It really is, raw fish that's been marinated, but, in citrus. But the citrus never really cooks the fish, whatever they tell you. You're still eating raw fish. But I've had so many people who say, oh my God, it was my favorite thing, and I never thought I'd love raw fish. So, be open-minded about dishes, but it is very interesting to see what people love the most. And the takeaways are often very interesting. Most often, it is, I'll be neater in my kitchen. I pledge to use the freshest vegetables and fruits and meats and poultry that I can find. Often it's paying more attention to the aesthetics of the table, because setting a nice table just for yourself, for you and your spouse, or you and your whole family on a Tuesday night, it makes the food taste better. That's a good clue. But it's just also the whole experience is improved. And along with menu planning, if you do drink wine, think about, wines that go nicely, with the menu. It's all adds to the pleasure of the table and pleasure of the kitchen, and also to your satisfaction. One of the things I do point out in the book a lot too is I think we're all 2-speed cooks. By that I mean there are days we wake up in the morning and we say, wow, I just want to spend the whole day in the kitchen. I'm going to make puff pastry, and then I'm going to make some brioche, then I'm going to make a tarte tatin, and then I'm going to do this. And the end of the day, you're just very proud and pat yourself on the back for all these beautiful things you made. And then there are other days that it's 6 o'clock at night and you say, what the heck am I going to make for dinner? So I think that, and you can have the same satisfaction from that quickie pasta you put together as you do from a whole day of cooking. But I think there are 2 speeds in life, and I think, it's good to kind of be conscious of that. And as I said, the aesthetics to me are very important. And it, again, doesn't have to be something that costs a fortune, but, having nice little napkin rings and nice napkins and a nice either linens or even nice placemats. I'm a big fan of just simple white plates because I think food can just look so much better on that. So I think, okay, now you've had my whole cooking class, so you don't have to. What else can I say about the book? It's been a pleasure to put it together in the way I did. I think that if you've looked at the pictures, for me, cooking is just not the pleasures of cooking, but it's also a lifestyle. It's collecting all that china and putting these things together and really giving whatever it is you do your own personality and your own specific viewpoint on the way food should taste and food should look. Okay? Now you know everything, right? Your neighbor is going to be so happy when you go home. And I know we have a million questions here. Yes.
I made your manchego chorizo paprika bread.
Yes.
And I have a new appreciation for, I'm an American and I like doing things fast. But I have a new appreciation for weighing. I got out a scale. I
Yay!
haven't looked at that scale in a long time, but I realized all those little chunks of meat and cheese are different weighed than they are stuffed into a half a cup.
It's really true. I'm glad you said that. In fact, I wish I could get everybody to, I should sell scales with my books next time. And part of that starts with, in France, everything is basically, or in Europe, actually, everything is done by weight. And you will find also it's a neater way to cook because you're not getting out all those measuring cups. You can just put, in little bowls. You can measure one thing, then add the other one, put it back to zero. And it's just, especially in baking, it's a much, much, much more efficient way. The only problem with the weight problem is all these, there are now 10,000 ways to chop cheese or, grind cheese. And the weight of grinding cheese on a microplane is totally different from the weight you would get on a rotary grater or on a four-sided grater. But heck, life isn't perfect, so. Well, thank you. I'm glad you've had new appreciation. Yes?
I have a question. In Europe, I found that the flour was different, the baking powder was different. So if you're cooking in Paris and Provence, are your recipes then in a test kitchen here and converted to those?
There's really, there's really not that much difference in terms of the final product. And I use like the same baking powder and baking soda that we use here. I can get that in France. So that I use is exactly the same. And basically the flours that I use are equivalent to Pillsbury's Finest or whatever you use here. The only difference might sometimes be in the taste of something like a simple dough, like if you're making a bread dough or a pizza dough, the flavor might be different. And some of the results might be different, but not dramatically. And whenever I have a question on something that I might be concerned about, I have someone in the US who retests things. The biggest problem I'm finding now is cooking with chocolate. The chocolates vary so much. And I've found recently that like Lindt Excellence is the one kind of universal chocolate that seems to work on many things and that everybody can find pretty easily. But and I was discussing this at a talk last night, and it can be disastrous. So you just better eat your chocolate bars. Yes.
On this, I agree. I'm French, and in my suitcase, there's one thing I bring back from France. It's chocolate.
Really?
I have 6 of them. And, yeah.
That's great. Yes.
This is, I can't believe that I remember this recipe. In bistro cooking,
Yes. 143 years ago.
there's a recipe for, I think, a beef bourguignon,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't sear the meat.
Really?
Yeah. It seemed sort of very much against the grain, and I wondered if you would still hew to that.
I don't, I can't honestly, but I'll be honest, I don't remember specifically that recipe.
I have the book here.
That's great.
What would you say?
But did you make it and did it work out, or you just didn't think it was?
It was ages ago.
Will you expect me to remember?
I think I preferred
Searing it first.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd have to look at the recipe and think about it and know where it came from before I, yes.
I love this bistro book, and I noticed it was a few decades ago.
Yes.
How have you seen food, your own interest in food change?
Does everybody understand it, hearing the questions? Okay. How have I seen my own interest in food change? Oh, I think it's pretty dramatic. I think you have to think of food as fashion, and we go in trends of ingredients and things we love to cook with. I noticed, like, last year in my garden, I mean, I've always had fresh oregano, but I just kind of went wild putting it in everything. And I think we go in spurts. I think if you know my food, I mean, salads, vegetables, fresh fruits are kind of out there as the lead winners of everything that I do. And I do like I like the 2 speeds of keeping something really simple, like a lot of these cold tomato soups that take 3.5 seconds to make. And then other more complicated, making your own puff pastry, your own brioche, and so on. I get great satisfaction out of that as well. So I think that just automatically I veered towards lighter food. And as you know, as everywhere, France, here, you name it, there's more and more, really fresh ingredients. I mean, I was down at the Union Square Market this morning, and I was so excited to see certain things. People say, well, I can't get, these beans. And I took a picture of them, and I'm going to show it to my students next time and say, see, you can get them. But it was exciting to see all the really great, beautiful, fresh ingredients that were there. So we've all come a long way. We've all come a long way, and it just keeps getting better and better. I mean, even when I moved to France 34 years ago, there were like 2 varieties of potatoes, and you found round tomatoes and oval tomatoes, and now, 150 of each of them. So it can be mind-boggling sometimes. What do I use this one for? But I think that around the world, we're getting more and more varieties and fresher and fresher and fresher. So that's all to our advantage. Yes, sir.
Talking about fashion, and have you seen a change in French cooking, which had sort of this tradition? Are you seeing something now in France that's different?
It's hard. I don't have statistics, and I just have my own, visual observations. I kind of judge by what's fresh in the markets. And especially for ingredients like fish and shellfish that are very expensive. I figure, first of all, they're not feeding those to their cats. They're cooking at home, and the market system just gets better and better. So I figure that tells you that people are cooking at home. Now, whether there's a younger generation is cooking less, I really can't say. But as I said, my observation goes from the market. Yes?
I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your cooking school.
Sure.
I know the one in Paris is on Rue Jacques, but
Yes.
where is it in Provence? How many are in your classes? And is there still at least a 2-year waiting list?
Well, not a 2-year waiting list, but we're pretty full for next year. But we start with truffle class in January in Provence, and in our house in Vaison-le-Romain, which is near Avignon. And that is a course that starts on Tuesday night, and we go through Friday lunch. And every single meal, except desserts, because I don't believe in black truffles for dessert. There are other things you can do with truffles. Every meal includes truffles. We cook. We have, I think, 4 hands-on classes. We go to a vineyard. We have an incredible truffle meal at a restaurant where this man really knows truffles and has a fabulous Côte d'Aron wine list. And I collect white Chateauneuf du Pape just for the truffle week. And so we have lots and lots of white Chateauneuf du Pape during that week. And we also go on a truffle hunt and visit the truffle brokers. And then in spring, I do 3 weeks in Paris in my apartment in Rue Jacob. Oh, and in Provence, we try to limit it to 8 people, but sometimes it gets pushed to 12. In the summer, it's easy. In winter, it's a little harder to get that many people around the table. In Paris, it's limited to 7 people because we don't have any more room around the table, but for 8 people. And that is Monday through Friday, and it's just morning and lunch. And through the week, besides cooking, we go to a market and go to a Michelin 3-star restaurant for lunch. We visit the Poilin Bakery, and also we have a wine tasting with Juan Sanchez at La Dernière Goutte. And in all classes, I usually try to do an olive oil tasting during the week also of local Provençal oils and varieties. And in Provence, the classes are, as I said, in January with truffles, and then the regular class, we usually do 2 to 3 weeks in early summer, and then 2 to 3 weeks in late summer. Yes?
Who were your icons as you developed your career?
Well, definitely Julia Child, definitely. I have her stove, and if any of you have looked in the book, we have several pages on her stove. And actually a great story. I met Julia when she wrote me a fan letter in 1984 when the Food Lover's Guide to Paris came out, saying, I hope I get to meet you someday, because I love the book. She was one of the most generous people as a colleague that I can imagine. But she was totally brutally honest as well. So if she didn't like you, you knew it. But I met Julia and Paul that September, and we remained friends. She had a house then a bit south of us, and so each time she came to France and she would go visit her home, she would stop overnight at our house. And in 1991, I knew that she was going down to close up the house, and I knew she had this white La Cornue stove, and I thought, well, you know, having Julia Child's stove would be like having Freud's couch. And so I said, Julia, can I buy your stove? And she said no. That was Julia. But then she got up the next morning, she said, I changed my mind. You can have my stove if you replace it with another one. Well, you know, go to Best Buy and get a, you know. So that's what we did. We went to Darty and bought a new stove and replaced her old one. But there's also a cute story because when we did install it in our house in Provence, it had some years on it, and you know, you wouldn't really want to be baking soufflés in the oven. It was a little wonky. So I knew the president, I just don't know the president of La Cornue, and I called him and I said, do you have someone who repairs old stoves? And he said, oh, of course, I'll have him call you. So he called me the next day and he said in French, I will restore that stove to its youthful vigor. And I said, do you have a pill for that? And he came and he spent a whole day replacing nuts and bolts and so on. The oven's still a little bit wonky, but we use it. It's great for if you're just going to be roasting vegetables and it doesn't kind of matter what temperature it's at. But the cooktop is great, and students love cooking on it and channeling Julia and feeling as though they're part of her life. But I do have to tell you, there's actually kind of a sad story in a way. I had collected pictures. In fact, there are several in the book that we had taken whenever she was with us. And you know how you do that. You say, someday I'm going to frame these, and someday I'm going to hang them up, and someday I'm going to do this. Well, finally, one Friday in August, I did it. I hung them, and my husband called me, and he said, Julia died today. Can you imagine? I mean, it was amazing. Amazing. More questions? You're all happy? Yes?
I'm wondering if you have a favorite rosé.
Do I have a favorite rosé? Oh, bring me up, yes. I will tell you, my favorite it comes from Domaine de la Janasse, Janasse, and I'm pretty sure it's imported here. Eric Solomon, who's actually our wine importer, imports Janasse. It's Janasse, and it's a Côte de Rhône. And it sells there for like €6 a bottle. It's amazing. They also have a €5 that I call the courtyard wine. But I figured, why be a piker for €1, you know? But you know that Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie now have their rosé. And I think it's nice. I like it. And it comes in the packaging is exquisite. It comes in like a champagne bottle. And we pay €15 a bottle for it, but it's kind of fun, and the students have fun drinking it. Yes?
What's your favorite comfort dinner with your husband and maybe another couple?
Roast chicken, great homemade pizza, just some steamed fish with vegetables. I mean, simple. We kind of go in spurts, or else it'll be pasta every night for a long time. Favorite pasta recipes. Usually something quick, especially in Paris. We don't do a lot of complicated cooking. But it's the best part is when you have lots of great leftovers, things that you can just reheat.
How do you feel about either the dried American spices or the frozen French ones?
I've never used a frozen spice in my life. I don't know. The question was, how do I feel about dried spices versus frozen? I don't know. I can't tell you.
The American dried ones?
I'm sorry?
Are you okay with American dried spices?
Well, spices and herbs are two different things. I mean, obviously, many spices are only dried. So, of course, spices are dried. Dried herbs, I kind of don't. Because, in this day and age, you can get almost all fresh herbs year-round. So it just seems to me, I don't really know any dried spices that I think perk things up as much as a good fresh herb. Yes?
Did you teach your husband how to cook?
I will tell you this great...
Together?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And when we met in New York in 1976, I used to joke that he was a better cook than I because he had more gadgets and more cookware. But we were just dating, and he invited me to dinner and cooked this lovely meal, and we call it the seduction dinner. I don't have to say any more than that. And I think we'd been married several years, and I said, remember the seduction dinner? And he said, yes. And I said, your polenta was rancid. He could take it. He could take it then. No, he's a very good cook. And in fact, in Provence, we've expanded Julia's kitchen, and that's kind of, he now calls it his kitchen. And we divide the groups up, and usually I take one group in one kitchen, and he takes another group in that kitchen. And he's gotten very... but he's gotten very serious about certain recipes, and he'll say, well, I think I need to make that one more time so that I can teach it properly. And so he gets very involved in it, which is very exciting.
Do you have as many men in the classes as
The only time we've ever had all women is when I do special groups so if it's like 8 women from Chicago or something like that. But they're usually I would say 25% men maybe. Sometimes 50-50. Often we'll have like 4 couples. And sometimes the guy's the only one, and he's very happy to be with a lot of women. Yes?
What do you grow in your garden in Provence?
We grow everything that the wild boar love. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, actually, we had a wild boar visit this a few weeks ago. And the first time it happened, I freaked out, even though we were going to be leaving very quickly. And this last time was a couple weeks ago, and our gardener had come up on Saturday morning, and he went to the garden, and he came back, and he kind of said, I think we had a wild boar last night. And I said, is it really bad? He said, it's pretty bad. So I went to look, and actually all I could do was laugh this time, because all of our tomatoes are on stakes, and the eggplant also, and so they were too big to get in between the stakes. So they didn't destroy any of that, and they mostly they root around for worms, and so it looks like they cultivated the whole garden. And so this year wasn't so bad, but a couple years ago, they took bites out of pumpkin. They literally just, they would just take bites out of everything. So now we have a little discreet electric fence around the property, but we grow probably 20 different varieties of heirloom tomatoes, lots of different eggplants, zucchini, cucumbers, every herb imaginable. Lots of salads. I do a lot of Asian mixes of salads, which I find really do well. I try to do watercress because usually that will winter over. And I have some big herb gardens that winter over really beautifully. So That I really love. And that's the thing I miss most when I leave Provence and go back to Paris and I don't have this wealth of herbs to play with. What else do we have? Well, pumpkins and butternut squash. I have grown, we grew potatoes for the first time this year, which was kind of fun. And I usually always try to add a few little wacky things. I do like to have a lot of little flowers that are nice, like society garlic, that go nicely in salads. Because I like to mix, if we've got a big salad and I don't have enough salad early in the year, I'll do buy a mesclun and then mix in a ton of wild greens in there, arugula. Oh, that was the thing that was cute. 2 years ago, when they destroyed the garden, they didn't touch the arugula or the shiso. So they're neither Italian nor Japanese. Yes?
If you had to spend a week in a different region of France than Paris or Provence, which would you pick and what restaurant might you visit?
Well, we had a great visit to San Sebastian in Spain this summer, and I've always loved the Basque area. I think that's where I would like to spend time. And also, I just don't get to Brittany enough. I love Brittany, and I love fish and shellfish. As for which restaurants I go to, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but they're places I really love.
We have time for 2 more questions.
You mentioned polenta.
Yes.
And in this country right now, there's a trend with a lot of different grains and, different kinds of rice, but especially quinoa.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing more cooking with quinoa, or do you recommend, is there any...
I do love quinoa. In fact, they're actually now growing quinoa in France, which is really lovely. We have an incredible organic store just in our little village. And they have both French white and red quinoa, and I love doing the red and white quinoa salad together. Or things like for stuffing peppers, the old-fashioned thing. And, you can use grains in such ways where we used to use ground beef and everything, You can just throw away the ground beef and just stuff it with, really good flavorful, like either a couscous or there's just lots of things that you can do. Or make pancakes with them. Okay, one last question. Who's going to be the last? Yes, sir.
Are there any trends or fads that you're seeing in France that have yet to make it to the United States?
There are trends that are in the States that are there. If I see one more hamburger. Oh my God, every place there are hamburger pop-up stands and hamburger restaurants and hamburger this. What are the trends that,
Wait, can I ask you how you like Ralph Lauren's hamburger place in Paris?
I only went once, their pre-opening, and I haven't been back. I mean, look, people don't need me to tell them where to go eat hamburgers. What are the trends that haven't made it yet? I think, well, I don't know, they're here too, but I think there's more and more Asian influence in the I wouldn't say white tablecloth restaurants, but there are more and more Asian trends in all French food, I would say, for sure.
Asian, China, or India?
More Japanese, which I think is positive. Nice yuzu kinds of things. And I had well, actually, this is more French, but it was a lemon verbena sauce with a sea bass, which I thought was brilliant. There are a lot of sauces, light sauces, that I think are really brilliant, and I'd like to be able to have time to concentrate on those and perfect those. Is that it? We get one more?
One more.
Okay. Yes?
Truffles are in season. I just read an article about them in the Times. What do you do?
Okay, white truffles and black truffles are two totally different species. White truffles are only grown in Italy. I don't think there's any other place in the world that they grow. This is the white truffle season. They're outrageously expensive. And you don't ever cook with a white truffle. You just shave them on top of pastas or rice or whatever, but you would never cook with them. They're much more delicate. Black truffles are extremely versatile, and I've spent 20 years really working with them. I think I know more about black truffles than most chefs do because they don't get to play with them as much as, and they're also much younger than me, so they haven't had the experience. They're incredibly versatile. I mean, you can make truly delicious butters and salts with truffles, which can enhance, you know, for not a lot of money, can enhance a great deal. Almost all the poor man's ingredients, Jerusalem artichokes, potatoes, rice, pasta, truffles love all of those. So there's just a tremendous versatility, and you never really cook a truffle, you just warm it. I mean, one of the great specialties is just to take a truffle, wrap it in truffle butter, and then wrap it in parchment paper, and then wrap it in foil, and put it in your fireplace just to warm it up. And then what I do is I take my brioche and cut a little hole in the middle so that you can take your whole truffle, empty it out onto that brioche while it's warm, and it's pretty nice. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.